Do you struggle with edge highlighting like this fine young gentleman here? Do you get chunky lines that mess up the edges of your miniatures? Well, don't worry, because the DRPA is here to help. Edge highlighting can be tricky at first because it requires learning some fine motor control and also understanding how to get your paint ready on the palette. But give me 10 minutes and I'm going to show you how to do it, as well as show you a great way to practice the technique as well, so that you can take your miniatures from this to this. So we're going to start out by showing you a great way of practicing this technique, and to do this all you got to do is get a hold of an old sprue and then spray it black, which is what I've done just here. This is really handy because there's lots of shapes and angles to practice the motor control on there, so I do recommend keeping one on hand for this sort of purpose. And what we'll do is highlight it by using a white, so we've got a very strong contrast so you can clearly see what's going on. I'll be using some white star for this. Now what we need to do is start out by setting things up on the palette, and this is really, really important. This is where the whole core of it is. I'm using a wet palette for the example here, but you could use a dry palette if you wanted to. The choice really is yours, but a wet palette does keep the paint pliable for a little bit longer. Now for the brush that you need, all you got to do is get hold of one that has a fine point. It doesn't have to be a really small brush. You can actually use quite a surprisingly large brush for this kind of thing. And the one I'm going to be using is a size 0 from TT Combat. And you can see this one's great because it's got a really nice point on it, but size-wise, it's only a little bit smaller than a medium layer brush from Citadel. So ideal for our purposes, this. It is a personal choice though, so over time you'll find what works for you. Now to set things up on the palette, what we need to do is start by thinning the paint, and we've got to get it to the sweet spot. Basically don't overdo it, but don't underdo it either. And the way of doing that is to actually prepare next to the blob of paint. So you see I've got my white star just there. What I'm going to do is get a small amount of water on my brush, place it next to the paint, and then start pulling some of it into it like this. So that's actually the reserve that I'm drawing from. The paint I'm really going to use is just here. And what we can do is start adding more water to it as we need to thin it down. But if we go too far, we can pull more of the paint into it. So we can just go back and forth until we're happy. Now what I'm looking for is for the paint to have no resistance when I'm applying it. So a little bit inky, not very inky though. And the way you can test that is by having a go at just painting some lines on your palette. So here we go. If I just start painting lines there like that, you can see actually it's drying out fairly quickly. Now that's the result you'll get on your miniature. So at the moment it's not quite thin enough. So I'm just going to get a little bit more water, add that in there, just stir it in, and then we'll see how this comes out. So once again, try some lines. This way it's much smoother now. I'm much more happy with that. You can see it's going on further. It's going nice and smooth. I think we're at about the right sort of consistency just there. So the next thing to do is to clean your brush to make sure that you don't have any excess paint in there from the mixing process, and then draw up fresh. So run your brush through that area and then make sure the belly is loaded on the brush. Now what I mean by that is, if we take a close look at the brush, the belly is this bit around here, and you're looking for the paint to be absorbed into there as a reservoir. Don't go up to the ferrule, just keep it in that region, and this way the bristles will keep a fine tip as well, and as you paint, you'll draw from the belly just there. So once again, make sure it's nicely loaded, and then we're ready to start going. Now the first thing to practice with edge highlighting is actually to use the side of your brush. So if we hold the sprue like this, approach it so that you're at about 45 degrees from the flat facing of the sprue, and then just skim along with the side of the bristles like this. Nice and smooth, and a gentle downward motion, and this way you can see we're now getting a strong white line appearing on the edge of the frame. So that's the main motion of it. Just keep going along like that, reloading your brush every now and then as and when you need to. And when you encounter unusual shapes, such as the corner just here, just practice curving around it. Now the way I'm holding it right now leads to a very natural motion as I go around it there like that. If you try to do it this way around, for example, suddenly it feels very awkward as you try and go around it like this, and you start to lose that natural smooth motion. So always remember, whatever it is that you're painting, just turn it to make sure that you're comfortable with your hand holding your brush, and then this way you'll find that you get that natural movement very easily, and this results in a smooth highlight. Now if you're feeling brave and you want to take this a little bit further and you want to practice the fine motion some more, what you can do is have a go at picking out some of the text that appears on the frame. It's a slightly different angle here, but it does teach that gentle motion that we're looking for, because what we want to do is just skim along and just pick out the lettering. And if you find that it overdoes it, that means you just got a bit too much paint on your brush, so this helps guide you towards having the correct amount on there. So you can see I'm just getting the O and the N just gently there like that, just working along, picking it out. And at the core of it, that's basically how you do it. But what happens if you don't thin your paint down enough? Well, in that case, it tends to force the brush to be overloaded, and you'll get much thicker, heavier lines appearing like that. And then what if you overthin the paint? Well, if you actually get anything appearing at all, it'll be very, very runny and it'll tend to bead off the miniature. So that's why finding that sweet spot is so important. Once you've practiced that, you'll have the core motion down, but you won't always be able to use the side of the brush on the model because sometimes you simply can't access the edge in that way because the detail's too dense. So in these cases, you'll need to use the tip of the brush instead. Now the setup for this is exactly the same as what you did when using the side of the brush, and the brush should be loaded in the same way, only this time getting that fine point is really, really important. And to really test on the palette, you can always just twist your brush as you draw it along like that, and that'll help bring them together. So when using the tip of the brush, what I recommend you do is angle whatever you're painting so that you're going in a downward motion, which feels nice and natural. Again, the sprue helps out for this. So for example, if I paint a line just here, just arranging it so it's downwards like this, then do this smooth downward motion there to get a line like that. Now, the key thing here is making sure that you are bracing your hands together. You can see I'm making sure they're quite close, and this way it minimizes any shaking. But this way you can get that smooth motion, and really it's a matter of just practicing it until you can just use the tip of the brush to get that line. Now, on that one I was a little bit heavy, so that's okay. Can just get some fresh paint loaded and then have another go. And this way we're just looking just to graze along with the tip of the brush there like that. Now, to really push this practice, look towards the edges of the frame and have a go at painting some lines as close to them as you can. So on this one, for example, use the tip of the brush and just follow that edge as neatly as you can. Mistakes will happen, and this is nothing to worry about. They happen to me literally all the time, but fixing them is nice and easy when you know how. What we'll do is have a go at making some mistakes now to show you, and we'll start out by just putting a bit too much paint on there. So again, just like before, I want to get that brush loaded up, and what we'll do is start going back to using the side of the brush and show what happens if you get a bit heavy on it. So go to an open bit of sprue, just around here, start applying that edge highlight, but your hand might shake and you might get a blob appearing on the flat there like that. Now, if it's particularly thick, that's not a problem. Just wash your brush, and whilst the paint's still wet, just gently brush away some of that texture there like that. It'll smear a little bit, but just keep it light, and there we go. Then just let that dry from there. On the other hand, if you're doing an edge along here, for example, you might find that sometimes the line becomes a little bit thick, especially if you start doing it on areas like this too. It might be a little bit broad there like that. Again, that's not a problem. Just let that dry and move on, and we'll come back to it in a moment. Once that paint is dry, we can then fix things up, and we'll start out with the one that we washed away earlier on. The texture's now gone, so it's very easy to re-establish where the highlight's going to be by just redoing that motion there like that. But it has smeared things a little bit, not a problem though. Same with the thick highlight there. It's not a problem because what we then do is just switch over to the colour that's beneath it. In this case, that's going to be a black. I've got some Doom Death black here, and you can see on the smear, it's very easy just to thinly paint it over, going up to the highlight but not onto it. So just very gently blocked in there like that. Same is true on this highlight where it's a bit too thick. Just cut into it with the black just to make that line nice and sharp. And there you have it. The mistakes are cleaned up, no problem whatsoever. So really, that's the core of the technique. So what I recommend you do is just practice it on a sprue, but of course practice is one thing and then putting it into action is quite another. So now we're going to do all this on an actual Space Marine. So here's our Space Marine, who I've painted with marine blue, then I applied a Oblivion black wash over the top, then layered in with marine blue once again. So now he's all ready to be highlighted. And for the highlight, I'm going to be using some Elysium blue. So we need to set this up just as we've seen. So the first thing to do is make sure we thin the paint down correctly on the palette. I'm going to use the same brush here, so that's size 0 once more. And remember, you put the water next to your paint, then start pulling the paint into it so you can control how thin it's going to be. So just need to set this up, just feeling to make sure it's got a nice smoothness to it. And once you get the hang of this, you can actually get quite quick at doing it. It's feeling pretty good at the moment, so just have a quick test, and that's going fairly smooth from the brush, so I'm quite happy with that. So remove the excess paint, load up fresh so that we've got the paint in the belly of the brush, and then we are ready to go. So on our Space Marine to begin with, I'm going to look for areas I can paint with the side of the brush. So the shoulder plate is a great example here. Remember, always change the angle to make sure that you're comfortable, so you can do that nice skimming smooth motion, just very gently applied in there like that. I'm going to follow it round, change the angle of the miniature, and notice how my hands are braced together. I'm always making sure that in some way they're either in contact directly or they're in contact through the miniature, and this helps minimize any shakes. And so we can just keep on working our way around like this. Now, there are going to be the times where we can't use the side of the brush, and we're reaching some of those as we get to the elbow. So now it's time to revert to using the tip of the brush to do around here. The line for this edge in the middle is quite shallow, so I'm going to start on the outer one just here. Again, just very carefully using the tip of the brush to follow it down. moving the model as we need to. Then we can get that one, which, as I say, is shallow. So this is one where mistakes are likely, but that's okay, because we can always clean them up if they do happen. So there we go. Quite happy with that. A little bit rough at the top, but that's okay. Now for the top part of the elbow plate, we can use the side of the brush once again, just gently skimming in there like that. And then when it comes time to do the forearm, we've got that recessed panel. So I'm going to change the angle again so that I'm painting vertically, and I'm just going to follow that as neatly as possible. So you can see this is basically the process. It's just this all the way around. Now it is one of those parts where the longer you take here and the more attention you give it, the better it's going to be. So don't rush this part, just take your time, because it really does pay off if you get this as neat as possible as you go. And here we have the result across all of that power armor. As you can see, spending the time to learn that technique is well worth it, and if you decide to take it further, you could do with a second finer edge highlight. Now for this sort of thing, go for a lighter shade. In this case, I'm using some Celestial Blue, and just do that in light, gentle grazing motion, but concentrate it just on sharper edges and corners that stand out. So for example, these points here in the shoulder pads, just help them pop a little bit more. So here is the final result with the edge highlight applied to the armour using the techniques demonstrated in this video. So at its core, edge highlighting is quite straightforward. It just takes a bit of practice. And remember the key things. The first thing is to make sure you set the paint up correctly on a palette by thinning it down to the right consistency. Then load your brush to make sure there's not too much paint or too little on there. And then practice that motion as you apply it to your miniature. And using spare sprue is ideal for this to really get the hang of how heavy you should be as you apply the brush to the model. Now it is something that takes some practice, so don't expect to have it straight away. You do need to work at it to get the feel for it. But once you do, you'll find actually it comes naturally and it's very easy to do. And once you've got it, all of a sudden your miniatures are going to look amazing. So have fun. I really hope this video has been helpful to you, and we'll see you again very soon.